What's up guys, Shawnthebro here, and in today's episode of the fighting game tutorial series, we are going to be going over the last of the menu navigation improvements. I'm sure there will be more in the series, but this is the last of the overall system change that we're doing so that all the menus can be on the same page. So this is a really important one because this makes our code base so much cleaner and easier to work with. And honestly, I'm really happy with our navigation system as well. So specifically today, we are going to fix up the change outfit input. We're going to bind that action to something in our widget navigation interface so that we have some sort of alternate button we can press to change things like the character's outfit, the stage type, and other settings. We are also going to go over the start input, which is how we're going to proceed through menus. And another thing that we will cover, removing any of the old listen for input action logic that we still had from the previous episodes. That way we can be one-to-one. Now we are still going to have the two-player listen for input actions, just because our menus don't really support two players in the widget navigation interface. So we will need a widget navigation interface update for that specifically, but that will be one episode to handle the rest of that. And then we'll get back to some awesome gameplay mechanics in our series. So if you want to get caught up to the entire fighting game tutorial series, you can see how we've done things like attacks, hitboxes, game modes, timers, and a lot more fun stuff. I'll link you to the entire playlist right here in the top right corner. Alternatively, if you don't care about that, you just care about the widget navigation and menu upgrades, I still recommend you watch the other episodes of our widget navigation upgrades, because we're all building on top of that system. So if you watch from the first one, you'll be able to follow along with this perfectly. With that out of the way, we can go ahead and get started. This is a code and blueprint tutorial series. We're going to be adding the logic to the code today, and then we'll be converting a couple blueprints that had the old listen for input action system, and we'll make sure that they use the new system as well. So starting out, we can go to Visual Studio, and we want to go to our widget navigation interface. Specifically, the .h file, the .cpp doesn't have anything in it. We're just making the events or functions to be triggered and letting the handler handle the logic. So we want to go to the header file here. And I'm going to scroll down to the bottom, and I'm going to make two new functions. So U function, and I want to follow the same methods as before. So blueprint implementable event, blueprint callable. And this first one is going to be the change outfit button, but I don't really want to call it that. I want it to be more generic than that. So I'm not entirely sure what we should call this input. I'll call it alternate for now. So void alternate. So basically the X button on an Xbox controller is going to be the one that changes our outfit and stage parameters, and maybe we can change other things on other menus because of this too. We can pick a different name for it if it needs it later in the series. As long as we have the logic here, it will be very easy to do. And now the other one we need is another U function. You can just copy this line if you want, but it's blueprint implementable event, and it's blueprint callable. Void. I'm going to call this one start. I think that one is self-explanatory. So start is basically pressing the start input on a controller. I'm not only confirming my option, I'm skipping to the next menu. So like when you select both your characters in the character select, you have the ability to modify those characters still by changing their outfits and such. Start is what gets you to the next menu. And honestly, you can probably use start in most places you use confirm. So void start. Now we want to go to our base player controller.h and scroll down in here to our menu inputs. We do have perform start input logic. We just did not have a widget navigation interface function for it. The options input logic is the button to the left of the guide button on an Xbox controller. It's a special button to open up options, different from pause. It's specific to our practice mode right now, but we could use it for other things. The perform start input logic function works perfectly fine here, but we want to add some more functions in here for when these things get called. Even though we have this start input, I still want to have a specific function for when we press this on the menu. After menu tab right, I'm going to say U function, blueprint callable, and it's going to be void menu start, and U function, blueprint callable, void menu alternate. Now we can go into baseplayercontroller.cpp. If we go out toward the top, we have our setup input component, which is where we bind all of our actions. You'll see a lot of our menu actions are bound right here, and we can add these and make it no different than the others. Except the start input really is handled already. We use it for things like pausing the game and skipping character entrances. And this is one of the inputs I'm not going to allow to be bound and changed. This is like the menu ones where I want them to be a static input that always exists even if the player switches their controls. I'll leave start and options inputs alone, but I do want to bind our alternate one. So input component bind action. In the project right now, this is called change outfit, I believe, but I want to change this. I'm going to call it menu alternate. I know it's a very generic name, but I think it fits for now. And we're going to say IE pressed, comma this, because we want to trigger this when this input is pressed on this object, which is the player controller we are in. And we want to call a base player controller menu alternate. So we can go down to our menu functions that we have, menu left, right, confirm, return, and void a base player controller menu alternate, and void a base player controller menu start. I am actually going to swap the order of these around in the header file. You don't have to do this. I just like to keep them in the same order that I am calling them. So alternate above start. Again, not required, just a personal preference to keep things clean. So menu alternate is going to be the same as pretty much all of the other widgets menu controls that we have. So if current widget. So if there's a current widget, which means there is a widget to be controlled. If there's no current widget, we don't have anything to use these commands on. So if current widget, and we're going to check if the class of the widget implements the widget navigation interface. Because if it doesn't implement that interface, then we won't be able to call the functions on the interface that we need. They won't be handled by that widget. So get class implements interface, and we want to check to see if it implements the widget navigation interface class that we have. And we're going to use static class here. And if it does implement that interface, then we can go ahead and call the corresponding function iWidget navigation interface execute alternate. And we will pass in the current widget. So there we go. This one's all set up and ready to go. We can do the same for menu start, but where we're calling this from is going to be a little bit different, since you see we did not bind it in the setup input component. So if current widget, then if current widget, get class, we're going to see if it implements the interface yet again, and we're looking for a uWidget navigation interface, static class. Same line as above, you can copy it if you want to. iWidget navigation interface, and we're going to say execute start and pass in current widget. So it looks the same as the other menu inputs, but instead of performing this when we press the button directly, we are going to handle it in perform start input logic. So if we look at this function here, this logic exists to check what match state the game mode is in. So the game mode has a match state, which determines if we are in default, which means menus we haven't gotten to a match yet, or we're in some sort of fallback state. Then we have the stage intro, and if we're in the stage intro, we can skip it. If we're in the character entrances, we can skip them. If we're not in any of those, we can pause the game. The same button is handling all of these. So toward the top of the function here, we check to make sure the game mode match state is not equal to eMatchState : e_default. Now default in here basically means we're in the menus. It would be fine to call the function when we were in default if there weren't menus like the pause menu. The pause menu needs to be controlled as well. So when I press start to unpause the game, it should be able to handle this. And to handle this, it needs to fire regardless of the match state we're in. So we already have perform start input logic, but I'm going to go and put it above everything else. And this is going to be our call to menu start. So we're going to call menu start here, simple enough. And I'm going to put a comment, perform start input logic on any active current widgets, if they exist. So if none exist, this is going to come in here, say, nope, there's no current widget. It's not going to do anything. It's not going to hurt anything. If there is a current widget, it will use it. And that's what we want. So we can just put it at the top of this function right here. So don't worry about these other states. Everything we have in this function is still valid and we want to use it, but we don't have to think too much about where we're calling menu start. At this point, we are ready to launch the editor again. So the editor is back open. The first thing we want to do is go to Edit, Project Settings, and go down to Input. And let's scroll down to our change outfit input, which is called in here menu change outfit P1 and menu change outfit P2. Let's rename this to menu alternate, and we can keep P1 and P2. Menu alternate P1 and P2, and it is 2 on the keyboard or the gamepad face button left, and 9 on the keyboard for if 2 players are on the same input device. Good here, and now we can go into the widgets that use this. So if we go to blueprints, widgets, menus, go to character select screen, and go to graph. Now we can look at these inputs. We should have them here. So here are all the P2 ones that we haven't converted yet due to that widget navigation thing I was talking about at the start of the episode. But we do have 2 P1 events that we can now convert. So we have P1 change outfit, and we have go to level select, which is our start. We already have the widget navigation interface that we're listening to in here. I am going to move down what we have just because the back and or return ones are so big. And I will put in event, alternate, and put it right here. And a little bit more moving down. We're going to put event start. Okay, so now we have both of these, so we can go up to the P1 change outfit and copy this node and put it in event alternate. Perfect. And we can go to event start, or in this case it's go to level select. And we have all of this logic here. We also have a continue button that does the same thing as pressing start. So basically it's setting up a lot of our values for when we go to the level select screen. And we want to keep all this. I'm not going to refactor anything right now. We also want these 2 disconnected nodes below. So I had this logic in the series to check if both players were locked in before allowing us to proceed to the next screen, which I think for the actual game, we do want to do that, but while we are playing in editor as one person, we don't necessarily need that. So I typically do it anyway, but I'm going to bring it over here. So I'll copy this. And I will come here to event start, and I'm going to paste it here. Now it's hooked up. I want to go up to here and take on press continue button so that our mouse inputs for it still work. And I want to hook it up as well. And there we go. And at this point we can remove all this logic we had down below because we've copied it, and it will still work. We can get rid of the listen for input action and the go to level select event. And we can also get rid of the P1 change outfit logic and event as well. And now if we compile and save, we actually get an error because if the timer expires on the character select screen, we call go to level select. So that is my fault. We need to make sure we do have a custom event called go to level select, and we can hook it up here as well. but now it's not going to be the bound input. It's just going to be a separate function that does the same thing. Now everything is happy. We can compile and save. Another thing we need to do is go back to our base player controller.cpp, and let's actually call this menu alternate P1 to be consistent. So any of the actions that are supported by P1 and P2 do typically have this suffix of P1 at the end in this series. So it doesn't matter what you call it, but if you're following this naming convention, let me make sure I add P1 here. I don't have the ability to tab left or tab right for any menus on player 2 right now, so this is a generic input. But for multiple players on one device, they can both be changing their outfit, so this is menu alternate P1. There is also a mismatch in the series, so we have start input, which is P or gamepad special right to perform our start input, and then we have proceed P1, which is enter and gamepad special right. Then we have proceed P2, which is 9 on the keyboard. So I'm going to adjust proceed P1 to be P on the keyboard. This is going to match start input. This means we could completely replace start input or completely replace proceed P1, but I don't think it makes sense to have two separate inputs for this, even though proceed P1 is meant to be like the menu proceed. I was mentioning earlier I don't intend to change the start input, so it doesn't make sense to have two of these. But for this specific episode, as long as they match, and we know we're not getting confused anywhere, our logic will work, but we will end up eliminating one of those in the series. Now I can come into my character select, and you see I have my character here. I'll pick my mutant, and then I will press P. This will automatically skip to the screen. Also, to make sure that player 2 can still change their outfit, we want to go to event construct here and go to the listen for input action for menu change outfit P2 and change that to menu alternate P2. We can also change the event here. This isn't required. This is just the name for us, but I do want to be consistent, so I'm going to call this P2 alternate. We can compile and save, and we want to make sure we handle stage select or the level select screen as well. So we come in here and go to the graph, and this one doesn't have an alternate button. I know I was mentioning that earlier as something we could have, but we don't have it. So the only one we have to handle here is the proceed P1 or our start input. So I'm going to make some space here, and I will add the start from the widget navigation interface, and we want to copy all the logic that we had in here from start match. So I'm going to copy it over, and actually I want to take the continue button as well, because this is the actual button on the menu, so if we press it with our mouse we can start the match, and I do want to keep that functionality. So hook it up and clean it up, and once we do this we can remove the listen for input action for start match here and just connect everything. That way this is cleaned up as well. Make sure you have the right name for this listen for input action. I had put menu alternate 2 instead of menu alternate P2. Definitely need the name to exactly match. And there are a handful of things we need to fix between the character select and stage select screens with our new changes now. But there's one thing that is actually breaking our logic, and we want to make sure we fix that right here and now. So specifically, if we go to our level or stage selection screen and go to our back event from our widget navigation interface and look at that logic, then we'll go to the end of the logic here. We need to make sure that our character select is now the current widget. So we'll set current widget, and we will grab our character select reference that we have on our level select screen, and we can check it for validity if we want, because if it's not valid we can log out an error or maybe default to another value. But right now I am going to check it and only set the current widget if it is valid. Now test it out and make sure everything works as expected. Anyway guys, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this episode and it helped you learn about more menu navigation improvements and organizing all your menus to work under one system, then please subscribe. It does more for myself and the channel than anything else you can do, and I really appreciate it. I want to give a huge shout out to my YouTube membership, Patreon supporters, and Discord members. You guys are fantastic, and thank you for all the love and support. I'm really grateful for you. If you ran into any problems while following this episode on menu navigation improvements, feel free to reach out in the Discord community. There is a link in the description, and I would be happy to help you with any problems you ran into. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Shawnthebro, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye, guys.